Diaphragm calls enable an elk hunter to make every sound an elk makes. Bugles, cow calls, everything in between. And when you couple a diaphragm with a quality bugle tube that amplifies the sound, they're super versatile and super realistic. And diaphragms can be operated hands-free, which comes in quite handy if you're a bow hunter trying to stop an elk in a shooting lane while you're already at full draw. Diaphragms consist of latex that's stretched over a frame, and then that frame is then encapsulated in a tape to provide better fit in your mouth. The diaphragm's inserted into your mouth, and as your tongue comes up and contacts the latex, you force air between the latex and your tongue, and the vibration that's caused is what causes the latex to make the sound. So if you think of a blade of grass, as you stretch it between your fingers and you blow air across it, the grass makes a high-pitched squeal. And that's really the basic concept of diaphragm elk calls. From there, it's just a matter of learning to control the sound. And honestly, learning to control the sound of a diaphragm elk call is really the only downside to learning to use them. But a little later in the course, I'm going to help you minimize that obstacle as well. The packaging on a lot of diaphragm elk calls often describes what the call is designed to do. You'll find diaphragms that are marketed to sound like large bulls, or for satellite bull sounds, or for cow and calf sounds. So how is it possible that each of these calls can produce such different sounds? The construction and design of diaphragm elk calls plays a huge role in how that call sounds. For diaphragms, there are 4 design characteristics that are important to think about when you're choosing which call is going to be best for you. And those are the frame design, the latex thickness, the stretch of the latex, and the tape that goes on the outside of the frame. So when it comes to the frame of the diaphragm, it's definitely not the most important part of the design, but it does house and hold the most important part, and that's the latex. And the frame definitely contributes to the overall sound and usability of the call. It's typically made of plastic or metal, with aluminum probably being the most commonly used material. And then the latex is just precisely stretched across the frame before the frame is then clamped down to hold the latex at that desired stretch. The width of the frame contributes to the fit and the comfort of the diaphragm in your mouth, as well as the overall sound that the final product produces. A narrow frame leaves less latex exposed, and it can produce a wider range of notes with less effort, but it can also cause the diaphragm to be a lot more difficult to control. On the other side of the coin, a wider frame might not be able to hit the high clear notes of a bugle quite as easily, but it will have a smoother transition typically between the notes. The width of the frame can also affect how the diaphragm fits in your mouth. If you have a wide palate or the roof of your mouth, a narrow frame might slip around as you try to apply pressure on it with your tongue. Or if you have a narrow palate like I do, a wide frame might extend past the sides of your teeth and make it very uncomfortable and pretty difficult to even use. The width of the frame also has an effect on another really important factor in using a diaphragm call, and that's the ability to seal air from escaping around the edges of the call. And it might take a few tests for you to find the diaphragm that provides the best fit, but recognizing the width of the diaphragm frame is a very important starting point for selecting diaphragm calls. Another feature that's often incorporated into the frame design is what's referred to as a backing plate or a palate plate. And this support keeps the latex from overstretching, and it also helps in controlling the airflow and the sounds of the call. Without a backing plate, the positioning of the call in your mouth is so much more critical to achieve the consistent quality sounds. But if you have a backing plate, it's possible to move the diaphragm to find the location that's most comfortable. Every mouth is going to be different, so it'd be impossible for me to suggest which frame might work best for you. But if you start out with a medium width frame with the palate plate design, that'd be a good place to start. In my opinion, the latex is what's the most important feature that makes a diaphragm elk call. And there are 2 elements associated with the latex that are critical. First is the thickness of the latex, and second, how tightly the latex is stretched across the frame. The thickness of the latex is going to be measured in thousandths of an inch, and it controls a lot of the same aspects that the stretch of the latex controls. The range, the volume, how easy it is to use, how easy it is to control. So a thicker or heavier latex typically requires more air pressure to activate it and more tongue pressure to control it. And it can also be a little limited in its range, especially up at the higher end of the spectrum. But it's possible to achieve a lot of volume with a thicker latex, partly due to the extra air and the tongue pressure it requires to use it. So for someone who blows extra hard on a diaphragm call, thicker latex is probably going to be a better option. But if you're wanting to make soft, sweet cow sounds, a thick latex might be a little bit more difficult to use in that situation. A thin or light latex often is a lot easier to make sounds with, especially if you're a beginner, because it takes less air pressure and it's affected more by very slight changes in your tongue pressure, so it makes it easier to scale up the octaves. You could argue a thinner latex isn't as loud as a thicker latex, but in my opinion, thin latex is plenty loud. For the soft, sweet cow sounds, thin latex is going to provide a platform that can be very softly manipulated. With the right control and fit, it's also possible to still scream a very loud, aggressive bugle, but it's going to take more control. Personally, I prefer a lighter latex due to just how much precise control it gives and how easy it is to use. Plus, I'm able to make any elk sound, bulls, cows, calves, anything, just with one diaphragm. If you need a thicker latex for calling, for bugling, you're likely going to end up using two different diaphragms. So you'll use one for bugling with the thicker latex, and you'll probably need one with thinner latex for cow calling. And there's nothing at all wrong with using two different ones.